Hi, Craig. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining me today for an interview for IronmanHacks. You hardly need any introduction. You've got five world titles, 3 Ironmans and 2 70.3s. So thanks a lot. Yeah, we met back in Putrajaya, Langkawi, and Da Nang. I don't know if you remembered or not, but I guess you probably have a lot of people say hi to you, and you probably meet a lot of people wanting selfies with you. Um, so thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the invite to come on. No, I'm lucky. I do meet a lot of people, and yeah, it's nice when people come up to you at a race venue or in the hotel and want a selfie or want to have a chat and ask you about your journey and then tell you about theirs. I think, it's where there's a great camaraderie in our sport, as you would know. Every athlete from first timer through to, the people who are winning world titles, they're all out on the course at the same time, have had to overcome the same obstacles to get there. And yeah, it's one of the great things about our sport. There's a great camaraderie. I don't remember meeting you, but I'm glad you've invited me to come on.
And I think that's one of the exciting things about the sport for us. Maybe not for you guys, let's face it, but for us, I mean, we get to be on the course with you. What other sport allows that? What other sport allows the pros and the guys who aren't even necessarily going to finish to be on the same road together? And I think it's really good for the growth of the sport, and it's awesome. So that's one thing I love about this sport. You're working with the Collins Cup, right?
Yes, I am. Yep.
What are you doing there?
I'm one of the international team captains.
Right. So what does that entail?
Well, that entails selecting part of the team. So for the Collins Cup, obviously they've modeled it on a sort of on golf, on the Ryder Cup style team format. And it'll be raced over the half Ironman distance in Samarin next year. And the majority of, there's 3 teams, of course. There's Europe, America, and the rest of the world. America, the US, and the rest of the world. So I'm one of the, or the international team as such, sorry, not rest of the world. And I'm one of the international team captains. So part of my responsibility is to help promote in the lead up to that event, generate a bit of interest around the Collins Cup, and also to help select the team. The majority of the team will be selected on the world rankings, but there's wildcard slots that the team captains can pick for whatever reason. If they think someone's come into form at the right time, or
so
just the same way they...
You need to be in tune with the potential athletes and really know what's going on and know their strengths, weaknesses, and probably have a great understanding of the whole field, right? And pair up the right people. And that's probably half the strategy, right? So someone else is doing the same. And so you and the other captain, in a way, are competing on who you choose. So
yeah, absolutely. It's just, it brings another level, I guess, to the contest. Certainly, yeah, we have to keep abreast of the landscape, who's racing well, maybe who's come off an injury, but are in good form. That's why their ranking's low. Yeah, and there's going to be it's going to be a unique format in the way athletes have to go head to head. So there's going to be a lot of tactics involved. And I just think, look, it's another format of racing that I think will be very watchable and is unique and interest. I think fans of the sport, people who love triathlon, will watch, because the biggest names in our sport will be racing. Daniela Reef, Lucy Charles, Annie Howe, plus all the good short course superstars if they want to step up to the half Ironman distance. And let's be honest, the short course athletes are more suited to half Ironman than Ironman athletes, actually. So a lot of the ITU athletes and the short course specialists will step up, and they'll step up very well. And then on the men's side, we're going to have people like Lionel, Sebi, Jan, Alistair, Javier. Amazing. So I think if you're a fan of the sport, you'll tune in and watch these athletes go head to head. But also I think it appeals to maybe a wider audience as well, with this sort of unique team aspect and how that might all play out. Some of the tactics, it's, I guess it's trying to cash in, so to speak, on the Ryder Cup in golf or the Davis Cup in tennis, how there's a little, some tactics around head to head. Who would, as international team captain, who would I pair up against Jan? Probably Lionel, I would suggest.
Right.
And on the women's side, who do you pair up? Do you put your best against their best, or what are the tactics around well, we think we can get points if we put our best against somebody else. And so yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's got some legs for sure, and we'll get some traction. And yeah, so my role is to help promote and to also around that tactical element of how the race dynamic will play out. Always felt I'm behind the eight ball. Maybe that was the reason I ended up having the success I had, because I worked extra hard. I never rested. I always felt, I'm behind the eight ball. These guys have more experience. And even when after going to the US and having a lot of success for 5 or 8 years on the sort of that pro circuit over there with a lot of the big Olympic distance races like Lifetime Fitness and Chicago, LA, St. Croix. I did those races with great success for 5 or 8 years. And then I finally stepped up to Ironman distance. It was like deja vu all over again. I thought I'm behind the ball because Norman and Faris and Tim and Macca, they've all been here for 5 or 10 years.
Yep.
They've got experience. They've got the edge on me. So yeah, it was like going back to the beginning again and thinking I'm going to have to work extra hard just to be able to compete with these guys.
And you were more of a short racer a short distance racer in the beginning, right? You weren't doing full Ironmans at that point, were you? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I didn't do my first full until I was 34. So
right.
I'd had good success. I was the half Ironman world champion when I got to Kona, but halves and fulls are very different. So
very different. It's a different feel, different game.
Absolutely. And, a lot of the guys I'd been racing at Olympic distance, like in the US, I guess like Craig Walton, Greg Bennett, Simon Lessing, Simon Whitfield, those kind of guys, Hamish Carter. When I would race half Ironmans, it was some of those guys. It was Lessing again and Terenzo, slightly different guys. But then when I went to Ironman, it was a completely different bunch of guys again. And as I said, they had success there. Well, when I went there, Macca hadn't, but Norman had won there a couple of times. Faris had won there. Tim had won there a couple of times. Cameron Brown had 4 or 5 podium finishes there. So, yeah, it felt like almost going back to the start of my career again, where I was coming in at the ground floor and I was going to have to, I guess, pay my dues all over again. And I was prepared to do it. And I think that was always just the mindset that I had. I never walked in. I always had self-confidence, but never an arrogance, because my confidence was always measured with realism. Like, I was a realist. When I came into the sport as a 20 or 21-year-old, I was racing guys my age or who were 22, 23, 25, who'd been doing triathlons for 10 years. So whilst I had dreams and aspirations of being a pro athlete and hopefully a world champion, I was also realistic enough to understand, well, that's going to take a while because these guys have got a big head start.
Yep.
And I'm in an endurance sport, which takes years to develop that sort of aerobic conditioning. So, and it was the same when I stepped up to Ironman. I had confidence in myself that, I could possibly do well at this race because I'm a half Ironman world champion. I've been beating all the best short course guys. But again, the realist in me said, well, you're going to have to be patient too, though, because these guys have been here for 5 or 10 years. Some of them have won here before. So you may just have to find your feet a little bit. And as it turned out, I didn't have to. I got second on debut. And had I probably been a little more confident, I could have done even better. There's no question that first race in 2007, Macca deserved the title. He was the better athlete on the day. But when I look back at that performance, compared to my later ones, it was way beneath where I was capable of because I was so conservative the whole day.
Right.
I just kept thinking, oh man, Mark Allen took 7 years to win here. He kept collapsing. Welsh kept collapsing. Macca's had 6 or 7 meltdowns. Surely I'm not going to be the guy who just waltzes in here and then takes the title. And I was so conservative, and it was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. I was waiting for something bad to happen. And never really got out of second gear in that run. I just kept thinking, better be cautious here, better be conservative. And then when I got to about 33 or 34K and realized, gee, I am going to make it here. I am going to get to the end. The race was pretty much done by then. And, but again, you get what you deserve. At that point, Chris had 6 or 7 heartbreaking races there. So he had the mental game and the experience.
Sure.
And finally got in a position to win and was able to close the deal. That's what his previous 6 or 7 years had taught him there. And I was the same. I learned as well. I learned in 07 that I could push myself a little harder, and the things that I had to do to go to the next level. And then I was able to do that the next 2 years.
Right. So that's a almost overly mature kind of perspective, because the vast majority of us age groupers, all triathletes, I think, probably go out too hard in their earlier on.
I don't know why. I just had this. I was a historian of the sport and a fan of the sport. I'd watched all those Kona coverages on the Wide Water Sports and seen all the infamous meltdowns.
Right.
And the one that I kept thinking of was Paula Newby-Fraser, who I think she'd won 7 times and then was about to win her 8th when she collapsed 200 meters or whatever it was from the finish line. It's like, wow, if someone who's that experienced and that good can get it wrong by that much, anybody can do it, especially a rookie who comes in here with a bit too much confidence.
Who am I on my first day here?
Who am I to come in here on day one and do it? So, they were, even I remember clearly that marathon in 07 when, we were quite lucky in 07. Well, lucky, I guess other guys were unlucky. It had rained in race week in 07. And I didn't know this, but when it rains in Kona, a lot of the stormwater runs off into the bay. And so typically you don't swim after it rains there because the water can be dirty.
I see.
And so I went down there to have a swim on the Wednesday morning, 3 days before the race. And I ran into a guy I knew down there, and he said, well, what are you doing? John Duke, his name was. He was the publisher of Triathlete magazine. He's like, mate, don't swim. It rained last night. And I looked over, and a few of the other pros were going in for a swim, but I took his advice and I didn't. I went and swam in the pool, and sure enough, a whole bunch of guys got sick. Norman got sick. Faris got sick. Ruud Kubicki got sick. Cameron Brown. So 4 or 5 guys who'd finished top 10 the year before in 06 all got sick. I think Faris pulled out before the gun even went off on the Saturday. He pulled out on race morning. So he'd finished 3rd the year before. Norman, who'd won the year before, he lasted 20 kilometers on the bike and he pulled out, vomiting.
Oh my gosh.
Ruud Kubicki, who'd finished 3rd the year before, he pulled out, he was sick. And Brownie pulled out. So half the top 10 was gone before the race had even started. And so I think, or I guess when you look at it from that perspective, I thought, wow, things are sort of playing out in my favor, but also being aware of the history of the sport and just how fickle that race can be. Yeah, I was very conservative in 07 thinking, and I remember thinking in the run, at any moment the wheels are going to come off because they came off for everybody else. I mean,
sure.
And I think when you have that sort of a mindset, it precludes you from accessing your full potential on the day.
Right.
Whilst it was still a good race and it's still a very fond memory, to finish 2nd on debut at a race that I'd always dreamed about racing at and I'd seen on television 20 years before at home in Australia. It was very cool to be there. And it was a big lesson in that, how the importance of self-belief, and not just the lip service that a lot of athletes give themselves. It's easy to sit at the press conference and talk about what you're going to do, but it's a different thing in the race, when the moment of truth arrives, to really be able to execute and do what you plan to do. And that's what I learned. That's what 07 taught me, to go back and how to race a little differently and to be more confident, and that I did belong on that stage, in that arena. And I obviously took the lessons well.
So that year you were 2nd to Chris, right?
Yep, in 07, yeah.
And at that point, how well did you know him? Were you guys, you're both from the same country. You both pretty much, you must have known each other pretty well, right? Yeah,
we knew each other really well, yes.
So what do you think it's like racing someone maybe you could consider a friend, but also a rival? How is that? It's how different is that than somebody that you really don't know, and maybe you just want to beat them and you don't feel any You know, you don't feel any friendship. It's aggression almost when you don't know somebody, maybe compared to a friend.
Yeah, it's different. I think everybody's different. For me, it was never about whoever was opposite or on my shoulder or behind or in front. It was more about me
Right.
and getting the most out of myself. I think I was very good at, and I wouldn't say I took the emotion out of it because I raced with a lot of emotion, but it was more around my own effort and my own family and my own supporters. You know, Chris and I had been friends early on, but we had a big falling out. We had a business together that didn't end well, and so we were, I guess we were rivals on the racetrack, but we didn't really like each other, to be honest. But I can tell you honestly that I you know, I wanted to beat Chris as much as I wanted to beat everybody else. Chris was like another competitor to me. He was just another guy standing in the road of, you know, of what I wanted to achieve. And there was a lot of them. He was right at the top of the list for sure because he was one of the good guys. He was one of the guys you had to beat to win there. So, but again, I just knew myself and I thought, you know, if I just focus all my energy and attention on him or on Norman or on Chris Lieto or anyone else, knowing how I operate, I'm probably not going to get the best out of myself. So I do desperately want to beat all of those guys. You know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you don't think about them in training and you don't plan around their strengths and weaknesses, and you do all of that. But ultimately, I knew to get the best out of myself, the main thought processes had to be around the things that I need to do,
right?
And how I need to stay calm in race week, and how I need to make smart decisions when the pressure's on, and how I need to push myself when it gets hard and it starts hurting. And a lot of those things in those moments had nothing to do with anybody else.
And you can't exert too much energy on them when you got to worry about yourself. So many things to concern yourself with.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, okay. One of the things that I try to do is I try to ask people like you, people like Mark Allen, Dave Scott, other guys like you guys that I've interviewed, what your main tips are. Or, I mean, the website's IronmanHacks. I mean, there's no hack to becoming to putting in the hard work, but there are some little things you can do, or some maybe mindset perspectives, or what would you say your biggest tips are for race day, for having a good race?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, well, the tips are simple. I think in terms of training and the physical standpoint, just be consistent. Be consistent with your training. Consistency of work over time is how we get the best fitness adaptations. So you need to be realistic about the number of hours per week you can train and then hit that number every week. And sometimes you'll take it up a little, sometimes you take it down, but you need to be consistent. And then within that week, you need to put together a plan where the sessions complement each other. And you're building on all the things that we know you need to work on: strength, endurance, threshold, all of those things. Probably the more challenging aspect of the sport is the mental side of it.
Yeah.
And how do you stay engaged? How do you stay motivated? And again, motivation is a very individual thing. Every person's different. Every athlete's different. And I don't think there's any right or wrong answer around that. The only thing I'll say is if something's meaningful to you in what's driving you, then it'll be powerful and long lasting. And I have seen athletes who are motivated by a simple desire to get the most out of themselves, which was me. And that was a powerful, long-lasting motivation. I've seen athletes who are motivated by the fear of losing rather than the joy of winning. That seemed to work for some people. Some people were motivated by money, and that seemed to work for them for whatever reason. And, you know, I never judge anyone else's motivation. The people who have had longevity, they tend to have good internal driving mechanisms and reasons why they're doing something. And I think it's good to understand why. You know, you hear people say, what's your why? Why are you doing something? Mm-hmm. I think it's good to understand and know what that is, because there's going to be many times in the 6 or 12 months leading up to the race, and there's going to be many times the week leading up to the race, and there's going to be many times in the race when you face that confronting moment of it's getting hard and I have choices to make and what am I doing? And if you understand what's driving you, what's you know, when the alarm goes off at 4:30 and it's raining outside, what's making you get out of bed?
What's your purpose?
Yeah.
Because
What is it that's
it's so easy to say this doesn't make sense. Am I doing this for my ego? I've done this before. Why am I doing it again? And
yeah.
it's so easy to just, realize that it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. And so I think, and that's where the self-awareness comes into it. And look, if some people do it for ego, but for them that's meaningful and it gives them some sort of definition in their life. I mean, who am I to judge? I know I did a personality profile, and what I learned from it was, particularly towards the back end of my career, I felt I was being very selfish because it's a very self-driven sport, especially when you're racing and trying to win in Kona. It takes over your whole life and that of your family. And what I learned from this profile was, when you've won a few world titles, and if you've been lucky enough to win many, and I've won 5, I started questioning myself, thinking, well, why do I want to win another one?
Yeah.
Well, how's 6 different to 5? I mean, I guess it is. 6 is one more than 5, and that's how we get judged, and that's how we judge ourselves. But how does it really change my life now? Because I've got young children, and I've got a wife who's sacrificed pretty much her career and her life so we could travel internationally for 20 years. I'm still making money, and I can still do other races without doing Kona, so I can still provide for my family. What I learned was that I'd got to the point in my life where I needed an external reason or drive or a greater purpose rather than just winning another world title for the sake of winning it. And that's not to say that someone who just wants to rack up as many titles and get to 5 and say I want 6, and get to 6 and say I want 7. I'm not here today to sort of denigrate that. That if that's what drives someone, that's what drives them. I'm just saying, for me, the mere fact of just winning another world title wasn't driving me as much as it had earlier in my career. I'd got to the point in my life, because I think we change as people.
Sure.
So I got to the point in my life where winning and then winning again, backing it up, and then trying to go again, and then trying to create some sort of, I guess, legacy. I can do it again. I'm now in the same realm as Peter. I'm going for 3, or I'm going for date. That did drive me early on. I thought, and not even from an ego standpoint, it was more when I figured out I was good enough to win one. I thought, well, I wonder how good I can be. I mean, I guess I should keep going down this path and see where it leads. You know what I mean? But then I sort of got.
You're still racing.
I am, yes, I am still racing because I love to race, and that's another thing. Like, even now, I love to train and I love to race, but it's not my day-to-day priority
Right.
like it used to be. I don't set up my whole year around a couple of races like I used to. We don't travel internationally and base in the Northern Hemisphere for 6 months of the year like we used to. And for a number of reasons, I'd sort of felt the well was dry, not in terms of motivation or desire to keep doing it, because I loved that lifestyle, and so did my family, actually. But my kids were at that age now where it was getting too hard to homeschool. My oldest daughter had her friends back in school. It just felt to me too selfish to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And there were other reasons and other things in life which were good things that I wanted to experience and I wanted to do, and other opportunities that were presenting. So, I mean, I feel like I've got the perfect balance now. I'm still able to. I train every day. I race. The last couple of years, I've probably only averaged 4 to 5 races a year, but they've been good ones. Like Da Nang last year was the regional championships against a top level field.
Yeah.
I raced the Australian 70.3 champs against Mike Phillips, got second. I won the race. I was lucky enough to win. I got another Aussie title, and Mike had just come off winning Ironman New Zealand. Maxie Newman was there. He just won Ironman Cairns this year. Matt Burton, who'd got second to Alistair Brownlee in Busselton, was there. So I really thrive on racing that caliber of athlete, the good guys, the guys who are at the pointy end of the field. That still motivates me. But yeah, I'm at a point in my life where I just don't have to live it and breathe it every day anymore. And
it's not who you are in terms of your livelihood as far as your identity. I mean, you have other things and you have a family.
Yeah.
So it doesn't define you like it maybe did 20 years ago, right?
Definitely. And I think you just go through phases where it did define me, I guess, and it was my life. and it was my main focus each and every day and 365 days of the year.
Yeah.
And I loved when it was like that. I loved that mindset of checking all the boxes every day, of running out every ground ball, of doing absolutely everything, of training very hard, of continually sharpening my mental game. But yeah, I guess you move on to other phases of your life and having children, and the children, particularly not just having the kids, but as they get older and start having little lives of their own, and you want to be invested with what they're doing. And but see, I was just going to, sorry, go on.
Sorry. No, please.
I was just going to say, to your point of mindset, I think it's important for every athlete to understand, because I sort of digressed a bit and talked about needing a greater purpose other than just winning for the sake of winning. You know, any motivation is honorable if you've just come into the sport and your goal is just to I want to do a half Ironman this year, or you've done a few half Ironmans and your goal is, I want to do an Ironman next year. Your goal might be, I've done Ironmans for a while, I want to qualify for Kona. I mean, any goal that's challenging to an individual is a worthy goal, is worthwhile. Nobody can take ownership of your own goals. That's yours. They're yours. And once you set them, hopefully they're challenging and they make you a little bit uncomfortable. You understand what it is that's driving you and why you do something. I think that's my advice to athletes is there's going to be a lot of times when your pursuit of doing whatever it is you're doing and the goals that you're trying to achieve are going to come at a cost. And that might be time with family, that might be financially, that might be connecting with friends. I know when my career took off to the point where we were living overseas a lot, you would miss family get-togethers, you would miss the weddings of friends. There's sacrifices, and there's obstacles and challenges that you face physically and mentally. And I just think when you face those challenges, if you know what your goals are and also why you're doing what you're doing, I think it's a lot easier to push through, to lean into it and push through.
Yeah.
That would be my advice.
That's excellent. I mean, I've had that sort of internal debates, like especially last year before Langkawi, and I have kids about the same age as your kids, 10 and 12, and then my wife is she's working and she supports me, but she doesn't know how I'm feeling, and I'm realizing how selfish it is. And I'm not it's not my job. And so, I'm waking up early to do what I can before work and trying not to act tired or anything. But, I have these thoughts like, why am I doing this? Do I really need to do this? But then, it all makes sense. But that's where I think what you said really, really comes to me, thinking about what drives you and reflecting on that larger purpose and whether or not you can stick to that. Because if you don't have that anchoring thought or that anchoring reason, you start to have almost internal fights with yourself.
Yeah.
And it would be too easy to give up. I guess as a pro, you kind of have the excuse of, well, this is my job. But I don't know. Would you ever but you also have different pressures. I mean, I can throw in the towel and nobody cares. I don't have sponsors or, it's like, well, so what? Whatever. I'm going to go have a beer now. Nobody's going to say anything. But would you ever, what do you feel about, like, are you going to retire ever, or are you going to race? Are you going to race as an age grouper? Because, my goal is to go to Kona, and we're the same age, and I really don't like the sound of that.
Yeah, look, I don't think you can't retire from life. So I love the sport, and I just love to train. I love to stay in shape, and I love what it's taught me. So I don't know if I would ever go and race. I don't know. I guess people have different feelings on this. My feeling is that I don't think I could turn up in Kona and race as an age group, or even if I had other things in my day, and I was literally only training 5 or 10 hours a week. I just think maybe they should have a special way for past winners where you just go off and, I don't know. I know that a lot of age groupers have strong feelings around maybe there should be some length of time before, if you've raced pro, there should be a 5 year. Because if the more you train, the fitter you're going to be, and the residual effects of that will last a while. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, the whole challenge of racing in Kona was pushing myself in those conditions and against the best people in the world. So if you take away that element of not racing to be the best in the world, yeah, maybe I wouldn't show up and race just as an amateur. I don't know. I mean, I haven't really thought about it. It is a good question. And to your other point too, about that struggle of getting up early and asking why you're doing it. I used to have those thoughts too, even as someone who did it as a career. You used to think, is this selfish and what I've noticed, particularly as my kids have got older, is that them watching me train so hard was a good lesson for them, because they often talk about things now from 10 years ago, especially my 15-year-old, or 8 years ago, or 5 years ago. So I think it's been a really good lesson for her, just to see, that if you want something, you have to prepare for it. You have to train hard. You have to, Dad used to get up early, and
very important.
Yeah.
I tell my daughter, she's 10, I tell her the easiest thing is not always the best thing. And she was taking swim lessons down at our pool in our condo, and the teacher was really nice and giving her, it was easy. It was more like play. And I want her to have the opportunity I didn't have, where I want her to actually be a decent swimmer from the beginning, where I had to learn to swim properly when I was a lot older, and it took me years to even become competitive. And so I'm still not good at it. So then I told her, hey, why don't you join the competitive swimming with a really strict coach, a really hardcore guy. I told her it might not be as fun as with Ronnie, but then she remembered. She said, yeah, but it might be better for me, right? And I said, yeah, it might be better for you. So I'm trying to give them that mindset, or let them know that sometimes hard things are good. And I think the way it rubs off on the kids is really a nice thing. And that'll cross over into academics and career and everything. It's just sort of a mindset or a work ethic, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, again, it just comes down to the individual approach of each person. I mean, our kids are interesting, aren't they? Because sometimes they're like us and other times they're not. And I think, you say sometimes the best thing is not the easiest thing. I think that's a great lesson to learn, because it's so true. And ultimately, your daughter might think that fun is actually getting quicker. So she might enjoy the harder work because the fun, and we don't know that. So, I mean, ultimately they'll all make their own decisions, but I guess as parents, we just try and give them as good advice as we can, knowing what we know, but they make their own decisions. Yeah, but I've had this conversation with a few friends of mine in that, some kids just think fun is play, and others think, and you see that natural drive in others where the fun is not just playing. They're willing to do the hard work because they see they're getting quicker now, and that's the fun for them. Going to the school.
That's that inward drive you talked about earlier, maybe.
Yeah. So, yeah, and look, the whole piece too around what you said with, when you're training, and it's like anything in life, you've got to find, it all starts with good balance, right? You've got to be present when you're there with your family. You've got to be present at work, and you've also got to do things that stimulate and drive you. And if you're driven to do an Ironman or a half Ironman, it's about finding a balance to make all of those areas successful. So yeah, you can't give up on your dreams, but sometimes it's hard work, or often it's hard work. They say nothing that's worthwhile is ever easy. And particularly as we get older with more demands on our time, it's hard to balance and juggle all those things. But the people who do it well, you see, they find a really good balance where they can just do all the things they need to do.
And I've never regretted it. I mean, I've questioned it, but I look back, even the mornings I run with my neighbor, I run with this guy at 4 or 5 in the morning. And then we have this saying between us: we never regret a run, even if it's hard. By the time you come home, you're home at 6:15. You've just done 20 kilometers or whatever, and you feel great about it. So at the moment, it's tough, but you never regret it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't have a whole lot of time. Let me just ask you about Zwift. You're working with Zwift a bit, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm one of their ambassadors, and I just feel it's revolutionized indoor training, made it more mentally engaging and stimulating. The way you can do your own session on there, or you can do workouts, you can race, you can meet people to ride. And I mean, I live in a great part of the world where you can train outdoors, but it's getting busier. And I've just noticed traveling around so much, particularly up through Asia and certain places, it's when you live in an urban environment, it's just getting harder and harder to train. So
Yeah.
I think Zwift it's really opened up the indoor training piece where, and I've always found indoor training to be incredibly beneficial because you're not dealing with traffic, so it's obviously safe, but also from that standpoint of doing hard efforts, you don't have to worry about traffic lights, traffic, weather. So you can really, and it's always been a very effective way to train from a time perspective. An hour and 20 on an indoor trainer, I think is the equivalent to burning the same number of calories that you might burn in an hour 40 to 2 hours on the road, because there's no downhill coasting.
That's right.
There's no tailwinds. It's pedaling the whole time.
And when you build a workout, you stick to those targets. You don't have any.
Absolutely.
You have no excuses. Nothing happening. It's
very specific and very focused, and you can prescribe workouts exactly the way you want to do them. There's no wasted time. It's good bang for your buck in terms if you've got 60 minutes or 80 minutes. Maybe if you've got 30 or 40 minutes, you can get on there and do a 20-minute FTP test. You get a great workout in. It's safe. It's just such a good use of time. So I've always felt indoor training was really effective, but it was boring. You could watch movies, you could listen to music, or then when Zwift came along, I just think that sort of in-game feeling, it's just interesting. It makes the time pass quicker. It's more mentally engaging. And yeah, I've really enjoyed my 2 years on there, being able to meet athletes. I mean, I regularly meet athletes from all around the place. I'm actually riding today in 35 minutes with a group in Dubai.
Okay.
So I went up there and did a couple of training camps. I did about 4 or 5 camps up there. The last one was probably 7 or 8 years ago, but yeah, I still ride with the group up there a couple of times a week. I just think it's a really great way to mobilize people and get people together to train. And it's not a gimmick. I mean, as you would see, in our sport, there's a lot of innovation and technology, and a lot of it's really good stuff, but there's a few gimmicks that come in as well. But I think Zwift is just a really good tool for training, for getting the most out of yourself. And I mean, there's always been some athletes who trained exclusively indoors. The first one was Andy Potts,
right?
And now Lionel sort of
for sure
taken up that mantle. And I mean, I like to mix,
right?
Yeah, well, yeah, both those guys were. I mean, Andy was a world champion at the 70.3 distance, and Lionel's finished on the podium in Kona, and he's just a prolific winner of races all over the world. So, and they were both noted for their ability, particularly Lionel on the bike, and both of them on the bike and the run. So it shows the benefits of indoor training, and I think Zwift has just made it more accessible to a lot of people and more manageable from that mental standpoint of being just more fun, more engaging.
Have you done any races there?
I have done a couple, yeah. I've done a couple of time trials
pretty brutal, if you ask me.
Yeah. They're a good workout. They're a good workout for sure. And I know people were telling me, there's different things with the software. You can power up and you can do this and you can do that. And
yeah,
look, I get on there and just want to get a great workout in. And if I normally get off when I race on that and I'm coughing, I've turned myself inside out, it's been that hard. I mean, that's the best workout you can get. So I know a lot of people are disgruntled, and people were on chat sites complaining about people lying about their weight on there and the watts per kilo. And look, at the end of the day, there's people out there who will do that. There's people out there who will take performance enhancing drugs. There's people out there who will cut the course in a race. If they think no one's looking, they'll take a shortcut.
But you get your own workout in.
we all do the sport for our own reasons, and I like to push myself, so I can push myself very hard on Zwift. I don't. Back to the question of how I used to think of my rivals. Well, I more thought about myself, and it's the same on Zwift. I just think about what I'm doing on there and getting the most out of my time and my workout.
Yep. Don't expend unnecessary energy on others where it's not going to benefit you anyway.
You can't control it.
So thank you very much, Craig. Thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate it. Super nice talking to you. You may be one of the easier legendary types to speak to. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thanks for your time as well this morning. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Take care, Andrew. See you later.
Okay, see you. Bye.